looking at how you guys broke down the very, the floating SDGs, which indeed look great. And there are many landing pages and many websites explaining what they are. When you try to break it down into business objectives, this is very, very difficult, let alone in actionable insights, right?
Yeah, and there's another interesting point here, because so many companies will say, okay, so you've got the people and the planet and the purpose. Where's the P of profit, guys? You're not realists. Where's the P of profit?
Right.
Or they'll say, yeah, this is so remote from how we do our business. Why are we spending so much time on this? But interestingly, there's no alternative because what we're seeing is that business growth comes from purpose. So looking at Unilever, right? I'm not saying they're holy, but what we are seeing is that the activist brand portfolio is outgrowing all of the other brands, and more of the business growth, which is the engine which drives big corporates, is coming from single topic, activist, explicitly better for the planet or better for people brands. We're also seeing brands with a strong sense of purpose, or even with a B Corp certification like Frontier, become preferred employers for young people, or outperforming on the basis of employee loyalty, so talent retention. We also know that companies with an explicit purpose or an explicit diversity policy are more welcoming to a variety of people who don't feel recognized in more traditional companies. And we know that companies with a higher diversity outperform companies with less diversity or with less elbow room for diverse thinking. So it makes total business sense.
Yeah.
As well as any sensible company will know that you create value by having a longer term perspective, right? So the quarter by quarter thinking, which is sort of the old paradigm in the sort of US driven corporate structure, bonuses per quarter. I mean, anyone still arguing that that's the way to go. I mean, you're so last season, so to say, right? So everybody knows that we need is a longer horizon. And interestingly, for you guys, I think that long horizons and generational thinking and legacy all are very strong parts of Japanese society. So possibly this sort of multi-generational narrative for leaders to take is something that you could find strength in or elbow room in to start the conversation.
So I think that tying in profitability and business viability is indeed very important, right? And the other thing that we see very often is how these kind of decisions are taken on a C-level, right? And it's very hard to actually, for someone at let's say the front desk, to realize what kind of company they're working for and how sustainable this company is, unless they dive into these reports or they just believe, the green color of the website. So is there anything that you did in this project, or any, best practices to kind of make sure that the whole organization is part of this?
Wow, that's a really interesting one. So first of all, I think that the transition of topics like circularity, sustainability, diversity, inclusion, equity, moving those topics from the CSR department up to the CFO and then into the CEO, the CFO, and head of people, I think that that's the first transition, right? If you keep these topics parked with the lobbyists and the reporting people and the sustainability evangelists, then it will always remain a side topic, right? So one of the interesting jobs that we have to do as creative people and strategy people is to create a narrative that the other departments in the C-suite feel comfortable with, right? So that the CEO can talk about, that the CMO can talk about, that because attracting talent is probably one of the key challenges for a leadership team, right? Making sure that a company is attractive to talent is, well, that's, for me as a founder of a consulting firm, I think that's the job I have. So there's one, right? Finding creative ways of taking this narrative and making it something that other leaders can adopt and talk about and bring to life. I think making business sense out of sustainability in some way, if it's not already there and adopted, is also an important one. In the Heineken case, leadership team needed no encouragement or argumentation about sustainability, because in fact, many of the programs in the commitments were already up and running or already initiated or identified. But the narrative was missing. And so all we did was help them to develop this narrative. But obviously narrative is quite interesting, because narrative is a set of words that creates meaning and direction, right? So in a sense, raise the bar is kind of sort of a battle cry, which can be used to, say, Gambaro, let's go that way,
yes.
and I think that's something that leaders do, leaders. So this is great. Jack Welch from General Electric, he says, CEO stands for Chief Explaining Officer, right? Because again and again and again and again, you need to repeat mantras or explain how, why, where, and when we should act as colleagues, as a company, as a community, in what direction, with which priorities, with whom, how, etc. Right? So there's one. What we can learn from the Heineken example, interestingly, was that the board member responsible for this project was Stacey Tank, who's the head of corporate affairs, relations, and communications, or I don't know what her formal title is, but she's in the board and she's in charge of this sort of purpose and sustainability topic. But she would check in with her fellow board members, the CEO, the head of commercial operations, etc., regularly, and she just said, "Hey guys, here's the assignment. You guys are awesome. Make this really good." And then we'd get to work, and then we'd report at every sort of intermediate step. And she'd say, "Yeah, this is clever, but I'm not feeling it." Or, "Yeah, I want you to think about this specific topic." And then she would really empower us to do amazing work. But then also challenge us, so this was quite cool.
Yeah.
I thought this was really cool for someone at such a senior level to express such trust in the quality of the team, but also say, "I'm not feeling it," So spurring us on to be more badass, to be more cool, to make something which might fit on a bomber jacket or on a t-shirt rather than sit in a report. So basically understanding the Heineken company, which is all about joy and celebration and connections, and saying, "Okay, guys, I know it's a tough one, but come up with something where we can talk about responsibility and commitments to a better planet whilst we're celebrating and connecting."
Right.
And so I can imagine for any company, if we fill in on the dots, whatever this company is all about, or what the purpose is, or where the money's being made, whether it's a car company or whether it's a telecoms company or whether it's, I don't know, the sweet spot is talking about important, urgent questions with your colleagues and with your customers and your partners and stakeholders about where you want the company's energy or momentum to contribute. So going back to Paul Bormann and Net Positive, how is the world better off with you in it? And that's not a rhetorical question. That's something that you can really reply to. And it can be a variety of ways. It could be small things, but it can also be bigger transitions. And we should start by fixing, wasteful emissions or wasteful use of resources, of course. But we should also include, and that's why the SDGs are good, also include stuff like education, hunger, equalities, stuff like how can we be part of a more sustainable or regenerative system of production and consumption. All of those topics can be used as a starting point for explorations of how business can be a force for good.
Yeah, it's really nice to see how you guys indeed facilitated a process that created a narrative, and because of this narrative that was created, it was even materialized on such a level that you could pick up a beer filter. What's the name in English again, James?
A coaster or a beer mat.
A coaster, yeah, a coaster or a beer mat that you could literally pick up, like the CEO does, and says, like this is the kind of level you guys brought it down to. So that's great.
So whether it's something as small as that or it should be able to fit on a t-shirt or something, I think that's. So I studied anthropology, so I'm quite interested in rituals and symbols. And I think that, hence my interest in narratives and storytelling, I think that many people in companies underestimate the importance of these instruments that we have at our disposal, semantics, choice of words, choice of symbols, choice of colors and shapes, and leadership behavior. All of that stuff is underestimated. And especially when we're talking about these topics, which are all about complex, responsibility, challenge, difficult, urgent, you get the sense that it's always sort of away from pain type of dialogue. Whereas what we need is towards pleasure types of dialogue. Raise the bar. Yeah, let's raise the bar. Yeah, let's go. How do we do that? Okay, less emissions. Okay. Less emissions. Okay, where can we save it? Okay, what if we do? Okay, why don't we do solar panels? Yay, solar panels! Yay, solar panels! There's this. So mobilizing forward action cleverly until now, all of this forward energy until now has always been channeled into conquering, selling more, penetration, slashing the competition, conquering value chains, securing resources, right? Quite a old paradigm, military almost analogies, target audience, all of those sort of soldier words. And that needs to change, and we need to sort of so my point was we need to make sure that solving these complex challenges becomes a pursuit of joy or pursuit of beauty or a pursuit of quality, or in some way formulating the design challenge to fit with values or pursuits that were already always there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes values are forgotten. Sometimes you don't realize that, where the company comes from is a long tradition of serving, or a long tradition of building, or a long tradition of connecting or feeding, all of those wonderful, wonderful characteristics. So I think if there's any sort of hopeful or constructive idea I'd like to put into this discussion, is that it's about reframing these urgencies, which are sometimes seen from the old paradigm as losing money or risking a loss of profit, and turning them into something which is aspirational and potentially valuable, also from a business perspective. And it's challenging because you invest heavily in time and people and resources and maybe money in one direction, and the profit or the value or the reward comes from other parts of the system. Mm-hmm. But hey, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right?
Absolutely. I think, it's a tiny bit off topic maybe, but it really isn't always. I see this in many societies. I've worked in the Caribbean and South America, and I saw it there. And perhaps this is also relevant to Japan, where they're idolizing a certain culture and therefore forget, where they're coming from themselves and the strengths that actually brings and the Western culture doesn't have, right?
Definitely. That's an interesting observation.
Yeah, and I think that when you just mentioned that, I truly do believe that, especially in Japan, there's a big culture of sustainability embedded, and we should not forget that.
In the beautiful mastery of ceramics, sword making, haiku, calligraphy, there's lots and lots. So I think deeply ingrained in Japanese culture, as well as I can see from an outside, is this sort of pursuit of a beauty. I mean, even samurai were masters at calligraphy and poetry and all that lot. So from that sense, I think maybe Japanese business leaders should look into their own traditions and values and sort of unlock parts of that culture. Maybe that's a good one, yeah, because it's true, so we were just talking about the Dutch tradition of collaboration. If you look at Dutch society today, everybody's angry at each other and it's all a big mess and everybody's pointing at each other. But ingrained in centuries of Dutch survival is building dikes and dams and managing water so that we don't have floods every year, right? So that is a very, very strong tradition. And I'm sure that there's historic narratives in Japanese culture which you can refer to, say, look, when Tokugawa conquered all the lands, that's when bloom started. So, or when such and such collaborated with so and so, that's when, and I think that that's the type of meaning generation, the generation of meaning, the creation of narratives. That's what maybe we should be looking at.